Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Competition for Luxury, a case study in changing service behaviors for JW Marriott. This is the first webinar in the new Spotlight on Change Management series, and we are delighted that you've joined us today. My name is Lisa Stanley, and I'm the Director of Stakeholder Engagement for ACMP. Joshua Jones with GoToWebinars will provide you with the details of what you need to know to participate in today's session. Joshua?
Thank you, Lisa, and welcome everybody today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Over at the right-hand side of your display, you should see the GoToWebinar control panel, and through this you can interact with us. You may have joined the audio presentation using your computer speakers by default. If you can hear music through your computer, you'll be able to hear the presentation. If you would prefer to join conference audio by telephone, please select Use Telephone in the audio portion of the control panel. Dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit your text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions portion of this panel. Please send questions and comments anytime during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Lisa, back to you.
Thank you, Joshua. I would now like to introduce our speaker today, James Addison, Senior Director, Organizational Capability with Marriott International. As a member of Marriott International's Change Management Center of Excellence since 2008, James has supported a number of global change initiatives ranging from complex system implementations to complete brand transformations. Prior to joining Marriott, he consulted to business and government clients on a variety of issues, including market assessments and strategy formulation. Drawing on this experience, James developed a unique model for managing change that serves as the foundation for Marriott's change management practice. He was also instrumental in designing a global change management training program to certify Marriott managers in this methodology. James, let me turn it over to you. Let's cover our first polling question. Today, we want to determine the experience level of our audience before we get started. First polling question should be appearing on your screen.
Thank you, Lisa.
How many years experience do you have in change?
Great, and as our attendees are already voting, we just want to remind everybody, go ahead and select your appropriate response, the most appropriate response, and remember to click the submit button down below. We'll keep the polling question open for just a few more seconds. Looks like we're over 70% responded so far. Okay, we've closed the poll and we'll share the results. Lisa?
It looks like we're nearly evenly split with the highest response rate, 3 to 5 years experience in change management, 24% for less than 3 years, as well as 6 to 10 years, 16% at 11 to 15 years, and more than 15 years, 9%. James, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Joshua, and good day to everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm excited to be kicking off this webinar series for ACMP. And for that, let me thank Lisa and all the team at ACMP for the opportunity. What we'd like to be doing today is taking a look at change management as it's practiced here at Marriott International. We set up a few clear objectives for our short call today, and I just want to take a moment to review those with you. The first, we're going to be discussing the competitive marketplace in the luxury tier of hospitality. We're going to be really looking at this from two different angles. Maybe if we could switch to the next slide, please. And the following, actually, we'll get the objectives up there. That'll be great. So we're going to be taking a look at competition for guest preference in the luxury tier of hospitality. I really want to look at this from two different angles. The first, spend a little bit of time considering the market forces that are at play, again, in this luxury tier. And then secondly, we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at guest demographics. Because as we're seeing here at Marriott, and I'm sure across the industry, shifts in the demographics of our target guests are really forcing us to rethink the type and level of service that we're providing in all of our tiers of hotels. Now, the question we're really trying to answer is what does drive brand preference or brand loyalty, and specifically in the luxury tier. Once we've considered that question, I want to take a look at our second objective because I think we do have some insights that we can share from work that we've been doing with one of our luxury brands here at Marriott, the JW Marriott. I'm excited to talk a little bit about our service program there, which we call Intuitive Service, and our implementation of that as a way to differentiate ourselves. I'll make just a small plug for the upcoming ACMP seminar in next spring. That is actually going to be at a JW Marriott in Los Angeles. And then lastly, to wrap up our session today, I want to introduce the idea of intuitive behaviors and really challenge everybody on the call today to think about how that may really require a rethinking of our approach to change management. Nothing radical there, but pick up on some ideas on intuition and what assumptions we're making as we manage change. And I'll share some personal thoughts there. And throughout this entire presentation, again, as Josh mentioned, if you do have any questions, submit them via the chat. I'm going to try to reserve about 10 minutes at the end of our talk today to take any questions that you might have. Now, if there's a unifying theme to all of these objectives, and in fact to my presentation today, it's all about staff service, and specifically of interest to all of us, how we can apply our skills and our tools as change management professionals to improve service. And to help me get a better understanding of you, members of my audience, I'd like to go ahead and start by asking a very simple question. Which of the following really best describes the primary focus of your organization? So we're going to put up another poll again. Now, we understand it's never cut and dry. Most of us work with both product and service, but which one is the primary focus of your organization? And Josh, if you can let me know once we've got full voting.
Thank you. Our votes are coming in very quickly, almost 90%. We'll just keep that poll open for a moment longer. Please select your appropriate response and remember to click Submit below. We'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results now.
Wow, okay. I wasn't sure if we were going to be evenly split between product and service, but a clear majority of us are in the service category. And that includes myself. Clearly, Marriott International, a hotel company, is in the people profession. Somebody has once described the hotel trade as really the ultimate people business. Certainly think that's true to form. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about change management as it's practiced at Marriott. The reason I want to do that really is twofold. It's going to give you a little bit of a better sense as we continue our conversation today about how I personally understand change change management rather, and how we practice it as a discipline at Marriott. It's actually a good story to tell. About 10 years ago, we began the transformation of our HR, our human resource organization here at Marriott. That was the transformation really was built around three guiding principles. One, that we were going to emphasize HR functional excellence. Now, those are the traditional HR functions, for example, benefits and compensation, as well as HR systems. A second pillar was going to be workforce excellence, and this is, again, talent management, sourcing, hiring, recruiting. And then lastly, organizational excellence. And it's this last pillar where change management really was recognized as a core human resource competency for our enterprise. We do have a dedicated Center of Excellence for change management. We have about 10 full-time change management practitioners. And as Lisa mentioned in the introduction, we support a wide range of both HR and brand transformation initiatives. I do want to add one other thing. Over the last 5 years, we've really expanded both the breadth and the depth of our discipline of Change Marriott in our organization here. And we've done that primarily by developing what we think of as a unique model for managing change, and then translating that into a global training program. And that training program has been rolled out on all continents, and our primary audience has been our human resource professionals, but we're also making that training available to our mid-level managers as well. So that gives you a quick snapshot of change management, how we practice it here at Marriott. I mentioned our change management model. Really just briefly want to put this up. One of the reasons is because I'll be referring back to this model as we go through the presentation today. If I had to highlight just a few aspects here, take a look. It's a very simple four-square model. I don't think you're going to see anything revolutionary or radically different here. But the four square really are defined by the emotional and the practical dimensions of change, as well as the individual and the organization. We at Marriott think it's very important to emphasize that emotional component. We have found from our own experience that most of our executives, most of our internal clients naturally gravitate toward the practical aspects of change management. The questions I most often are asked, the deliverables I'm most often expected to provide are training plans and communication plans. We all know those are essential, but unless we're dealing carefully with the emotional aspect in terms of how we're developing messages and paying attention to culture, we probably won't be successful. Again, that's what's driven the model that we have. As you can see, part of our focus is developing acceptance that is rooted in our organizational culture, developing competence that is enabled by our various structural elements here at Marriott. More and more, as we become a truly global company, and not just an American company operating overseas, I can't emphasize enough the importance of the cultural dimension and paying attention to that as we try to drive acceptance of any change for a particular initiative. All right, so that gives you a sense of how we understand and practice change management and the model that we've set up. Let's get into the meat of our presentation today. Let's take a look at the luxury tier of the hospitality industry, and specifically what the market forces are doing here in the U.S. We all know over the last several years it's been pretty much a roller coaster of an economy. Those ups and downs, the unpredictability of the markets clearly have had an impact. What I'd like to do is take a look at how this has affected the market conditions for luxury hotels here in the United States. I'd like to review with you two areas. This first one on this slide is simply a question of supply versus demand. We're going back to Economics 101. On the next slide, I don't want to go there yet, but the next slide we're going to take a look at another metric that really is specific to hospitality, and it's called revenue per available room. But let's start with this supply-demand graph that you have up on your screen right now. If you take a look really over the last 5 to 6 years, the increase in new luxury hotel supply has outpaced sort of the new demand sources, again, between 2000 and 2009. But we see a shift starting in 2009, and here, again, the supply increases have really sort of leveled out compared to a really dramatic shift, about 12% increase in the demand, again, for luxury services. Now, let's be very careful here. We're not looking specifically in this graph at supply versus demand. We're looking at changes in supply, changes in demand. But even then, if we think back to our Economics 101 classes, what happens when these are the market forces at play? It's really quite simple. Even when we start seeing percentages changes in supply and demand, we're starting to see market forces working toward increase in price. Now that brings me directly to our next metric. So we can take a look at the next slide. I want to talk a little bit just about revenue per available room. We call this RevPAR in the industry, and it's very simple. It's the factor of rooms revenue divided by rooms available. Now, this is something that in our industry we track this on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And what are we seeing? What are the trends telling us? Certainly here are the 2011 trends. Clearly luxury quickly outpacing the RevPAR for all other tiers in hospitality. And what we've also seen in 2012, I can tell you, is that same trend has pretty much held true. Again, the luxury segment is strong, and by all predictions, it's likely to remain so. As you can see, our luxury hotel RevPAR, and this is not Marriott specific, again, this is across the industry, it's expected to really be one of the fastest growing, again, as incomes of wealthy individuals rise faster than the general population. Now, I promise we're not going to get into a discussion of domestic politics here. But let's get a little bit more specific. Within this tier, within any tier, how does one retain loyal customers? What keeps guests coming back? That's fundamental to our discussion today, and that's really what we're trying to solve for here at Marriott, and I suspect many of you in the service industry are trying to retain your loyal customers as well. And one of the other questions I think we have to ask ourselves, and I do want to offer a perspective, is how well do we really understand how the preferences of our guests are actually changing with time? So I'd like to go and hear again from you, members of my audience, and to start this conversation, I want to ask about your loyalty to any particular hotel brand. And it's not the specific brand per se that I'm interested in. Rather, it's the strength of your preference for that brand, the strength of your brand loyalty. So Joshua is going to call up another poll here. How would you describe the strength of your commitment or loyalty to a single hotel brand?
Thanks so much, James. We have quite a few votes in already. You're doing great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we're at 80% of folks have already voted. Just a reminder, go ahead and click your selection and remember to click submit below to put that vote through. And we'll go ahead and close the poll now and show the results. Thank you, James.
Okay, moderate. And how I'm interpreting these, I would say a very strong preference would be you would actually make an extra effort to stay at a preferred brand. Whereas moderate, you do have a preferred brand, but clearly other factors may determine where you're going to actually book a room. In weak, you're probably just as happy to go with one brand or another. Again, interesting results here. Clearly part of my preference would be to move many of you from the weak and moderate categories into a very strong preference, and preferably for one of the many brands in our Marriott portfolio. But that's for a later conversation. So let's move on now. Given those results, if you'll indulge me for just one other question, I'm hoping you're liking this interaction here. But I want to figure out what really drives your loyalty to a specific hotel brand. So I'm going to give you 5 options. There's probably a dozen or so. I chose the 5 that I thought were most likely the greatest influence. But if you had to say one specific factor that really drives your loyalty to a specific hotel brand, what would it be? I'm curious what these results are going to look like.
Thanks again, James. The results are flying in. Go ahead and select your appropriate response and click submit below. We'll go ahead and close the poll in just a few more seconds. Okay, great. And let's go ahead and share the results. James, what do you think?
All right. Interesting again. So guest rooms is the highest. Food and beverage, not at all. The second highest is rewards program, which is very interesting. I would have almost predicted rewards to be on par with guest room, or gust room as we have it. So let's take a look at that. And actually, can we go back to those poll results? Is that something you can call up? Interesting. Staff service at 18%. I'm going to share with you now a survey that was done across the industry by a firm, Market Metrics. Now, this survey was done about 3 years ago, but I would tend to think, at least from the research that we ourselves do here at Marriott, that these results are still pretty common. So again, in hospitality, in this industry, the factor that can have the greatest impact on guest loyalty really is staff service. So we've got something different going on clearly, either with the demographics of our audience today or with the interests. But look where guest room is. Again, from this survey here, we've got guest room way down at 30% and staff service up at 47%. Now, interestingly enough, back in 2009, we really didn't ask, this particular survey didn't ask about rewards programs. But again, interesting to see the differences between our own group and the information we have on the slide here. Now let's get even a little bit more specific. If we go into the luxury tier, because this graph was less luxury, it was just hospitality. Our next set of data talks more about staff service and what is considered to be the most important attribute of staff service when we are looking at luxury tier, either sales or products. Again, this was a survey done, I believe this was done back in 2011. Within the area of staff service, we're seeing that the most important attribute is knowledge at 72%, followed by a professional demeanor as well as politeness and courtesy at 68 and 65%. So I will tell you, first of all, I'm hoping you're finding some of this data informative. I'm also going to tell you that this is probably the last, I think this is the last of the data slides. So if you're wondering what you got yourself into in signing up for this seminar, I do want to make this specific enough so we've got real information there. But we're now going to move into a conversation about what do these numbers really mean? How do we want to interpret it? And specifically, what sense can we make of this as change management professionals? So again, we've got some idea about what's important in hospitality to our guests, what's going to be driving preferences. But what I think I want to ask for, or ask us to consider now, is anything actually changing with our guests? And equally importantly, what's changing in terms of how our guests actually define service? So we've made a pretty strong case up to this point that service is a key factor that drives guest loyalty, service is a key factor that drives guest satisfaction, and clearly drives the bottom line, revenue per available room. But how well do we know our guests? What's changing? What's changing in terms of generational differences? What's changing even within a given generation or within a specific guest tier, again, within the hospitality industry? Let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide because this is going to introduce some things I want to keep in mind. So again, I'm not sure how many Gen Ys we have on the call today, and please don't take any of these comments personally. This is simply a summary, again, of a survey that was conducted back in 2007 by that same firm, Market Metrics. So what do we know, or what do we want to say here? First of all, we know that each generation of travelers has a unique set of attitudes, values, and work styles. Attracting and satisfying the needs of each of these groups really presents new challenges, not just to us here in the hotel business, but this is presenting new challenges to all of us, and I think forcing us to rethink some of the more conventional approaches we've taken to meeting our guest needs. Again, if we get some time during our question and answer session later today, I'd love to hear from you how generational differences are really forcing you to rethink the way you approach change management, the way you approach training, the way you approach your understanding of service. So just keep that in mind. Now specifically, if we look at the Y generation, Generation Y, those really have not yet hit the age of 30. A lot of research has been done on these generational differences, and I'm sure you've heard a number of different takes on this. But there's something unique about this generation. And true enough, a survey that was conducted back in 2007 suggests anyway that Generation Y really does represent the least loyal, most emotional, and least satisfied guests compared to all other generations. Again, this was a survey specifically looking at Gen Y in the context of hotel guests. So least loyal, most emotional, and least satisfied. It's a perfect storm, a nightmare, if you will, for anybody that's trying to attract Gen Y to their hotels. Now, what are some of the factors that are driving those generational differences? Again, and it's not just this survey, but other research would suggest that unlike other generations, Gen Y in particular, and again, I'm hoping that nobody takes offense, but Gen Y has been somewhat pampered, nurtured, and even programmed with the activities since their childhood. What does that mean? It means they're both a high-performing generation, clearly a very talented generation, but in some ways also a very high-maintenance generation. Now, I'm also doing some additional work here at Marriott with one of our other brands, and I just want to share another key insight because it particularly deals, again, with Gen X and Gen Y. As we, again, attempt to transform one of our brands, we have decided we really do want to attract this younger traveler. It just makes sense. What was a key insight for me and for the rest of our team here was how this younger generation actually defines service. So we can go back to the data we've reviewed, we can consider the surveys and the research, but what I think we all want to keep in mind is that service itself is being redefined by this new target guest. And one very specific way that that service is being redefined is the inclusion of technology as a component of service. In other words, Gen Y doesn't see service just in terms of personal interaction. If they're not able to connect to the internet, and preferably to connect to the internet at no cost, if the signal strength in the lobby is not strong, both for their cell phone as well as for their tablet, then that is bad service. It's bad service from their perspective. And again, from the hospitality industry, that's one of the things that has challenged how we think about things. Most of our service training has been almost exclusively focused on interaction with our guests, person-to-person interaction. So really forcing ourselves now to expand that definition and to include technology and how technology enables service is a key insight that we've had here. But there are other changes that are happening as well within our guests in the hospitality industry. And I want to take a moment just to talk about the luxury tier. Again, our focus today is on changes in the luxury tier, how we are competing for market share, and how service is a key factor there. There are two changes that apply to our luxury guests that I want again to mention. First of all, luxury guests today, more than previously, are searching for value. Now, what does that mean? Really, if we think about the changes in the economy over the last several years, what research has shown is that even our luxury guests, those who are willing to pay a premium for a hotel room, they now are looking for the deals. And think about what's popped up just in the last 2 years in terms of all of these daily deal websites. I won't mention any by name, but you know what they are. It really is an industry that has grown up overnight. And this has shaped not just how all of us shop, but particularly it's shaped how our luxury guests have shopped. So these changing values and consumption habits really are driving how we have to think about doing business. Now let me give you a very specific example of that. It was only very recently, and 2 years ago in fact, that you started to see within the luxury tier hotels offering what previously they never felt they had to. I'm talking about free internet, complimentary in-room snacks, free parking, and even loyalty points. Again, most luxury hotels, most luxury hotel chains did not feel the need to offer them, and in fact deliberately avoided them for fear that this might detract from the perceived nature of the brand. But it was 2 years ago in 2010, actually, that Ritz-Carlton sort of set the path here by introducing a rewards program. Now, again, it may not seem groundbreaking, but other competitors like Four Seasons and many boutique luxury hotels really at that point didn't offer frequent guests anything beyond a normal standard of service. So again, some interesting dynamics within even that luxury tier that we see. The last observation I want to share with you, again, around luxury guests is their expectations are also changing. If you were to ask a luxury guest or survey them about 5 years ago, they would probably come back and say their number one expectation of a luxury hotel was to feel pampered. Today, that's less the case. The priority for this guest segment, rather, is to feel excited, to feel inspired, to feel entertained. There's a far greater variety of experience that is being sought by this guest, and that makes it incumbent on us, again, in the hotel industry, to figure out how best to provide that service. So I want you to keep these changes in mind now, because I'm going to shift track here a little bit and look at one of the luxury brands in the Marriott portfolio. I want to specifically focus on JW Marriott Hotels and Resorts and tell you a little bit about that brand itself. Again, this brand is the namesake of our founder and our first chairman and CEO, John Willard Marriott. It is a luxury hotel chain within the Marriott portfolio, and it competes with other brands such as Westin by Starwood, Hilton and Conrad, and to an increasing degree luxury brands such as the Four Seasons, and of course even Ritz-Carlton, which is also owned by Marriott International. Now a little bit about our own target guest. For those that may not be familiar with hospitality industry, we go to great pains to identify the demographics for the target guest of each of our brands. Again, I'm sure that applies to many of you who are both in the product as well as service industries. For the JW Marriott target guest, again, we are catering to a sophisticated, self-assured traveler, and we know that these travelers expect hotel experiences really that have a certain degree of sophistication, but sophistication without pretense. And they expect, again, as we've mentioned for the survey results, they expect highly crafted experiences. But here's the key, and this is where we do think that there's an opportunity to be different, is to provide anticipatory service or intuitive service. And it's really being able to train our associates, to train our staff to respond intuitively, again, without inference, without the use of reason, but to respond intuitively to our guests' needs is, again, our goal as well as a challenge. Again, really to be a great hotel team, whether we're talking about management or our frontline associates, emotional intelligence is going to be key. This means that our staff must intuitively have a very strong people sense in terms of empathy, in terms of genuineness and authenticity. Now, but there's a delicate balance, and this is one that we try to address in our staff service training. And again, I want to talk about the challenge there, because the balance we need to strike is one between being proactive in the service we deliver and being presumptive. And we want to avoid the latter. Again, we don't want to get in the way of the guest. We don't want to presume when we might not know. The guest really should feel in command and not dictated to. Now, again, if we're not going to presume what a guest's tastes or preferences are, and our emphasis is going to be on intuitive service, the question then is, how do we sense that as a member of staff? How do we intuit that? Again, there's no secret formula here. What is important is that the entire service team really work together to get that done, to understand how to read our guests. Others have compared this to conducting an orchestra, that running a hotel for this level of service, particularly in this tier of hotel category, you need skilled, intuitive, and highly committed managers as well as associates. Now, it should be no surprising, again, then the service training program for JW Marriott is actually branded Symphony of Service. It's a metaphor that we carry through every aspect of that training. Now, what I'd like to do is bring this back to our change management model. Again, we reviewed this briefly at the beginning of our presentation, and it's here that I want to start connecting some dots for you, because the way that we have approached this service differentiation, not just for this brand, but for other brands within our portfolio, really does come back to how we understand change management and how we practice it for our organization. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide, if you will. And we come back again to the model for managing change here at Marriott. And I want to emphasize two pieces. One, again, not surprisingly, in the upper half of our model where we see training and performance support, we have for all of our brands, brand service training. Now this is the Symphony of Service for JW, and it has all of its elements. But there's something that I also want to stress, and it comes down to the question of organizational culture. How is it that we take that service training, which is delivered perhaps once every 6 months, and how do we keep that alive? How do we begin to build a culture of service for a brand? How do we sustain that culture at any particular property, any particular hotel? Now, we do that in a few ways, ways that we call daily stand-ups, as well as recognition programs. Now, this is practiced at JW Marriott, but I want to be generous in giving credit where credit is due. because this approach really has come from another brand within our portfolio, and in fact another luxury brand I'm sure that many of you are familiar with. Really began with the Ritz-Carlton, and I want to highlight in a little bit more detail how each of these categories really started out with that brand and how we've taken some best practices and pulled them through with others. So if you take a look at the next slide, again, you'll still see our model here. But I want to stress how this has been brought to life more specifically by our Ritz-Carlton brand. Now, a little bit of history about Ritz-Carlton, things that I'd like you to know, again, because our conversation today is all about brand loyalty. It's all about staff service. Now, Ritz-Carlton is, I'm proud to say, the only service company in America that has won the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award twice. And it's been designated by Training Magazine as the best company in the nation for employee training. So there's something that we need to be paying attention to here. Now, it's unique culture. There's a unique culture at Ritz-Carlton. Again, the importance of organizational culture. And it's this question of identity. We are at Ritz-Carlton, or they are at Ritz-Carlton, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. Now, the brand service training, we won't go into all of the details, but it's based on a definition of 12 service values, 3 steps to service, and then a credo. And this is pulled together in all aspects of everything that is done on property, but specifically through this lineup. And the daily stand-ups we have at other hotels really began with this idea of a daily lineup at our Ritz-Carltons. And the lineup is something that happens at every single hotel around the world. Every partner, every shift will utilize a lineup, and it takes really only 15 minutes every day. Part of that 15-minute conversation is always a wow story. This is talking about the great things that ladies and gentlemen have done to serve our guests. It's a great training and communication tool. Every department is there to layer on their specific department message, but to really focus again on the core of the brand. It's based on having the same message everywhere, every day, for every hotel. Now, I'm raising this as, again, an illustration of the importance of the cultural elements of our properties, the cultural elements of our organization, and how those can support whatever objectives we have in terms of service training. Again, when we open this up to question and answers, I'd be really interested in hearing from all of you whether you have something that would be comparable to a daily stand-up, something that allows each employee at each of your locations to somehow feel connected to a greater whole, and really to do that on a daily basis. Again, just another thing to keep in mind as we think through the important components of managing change. So this brings me to the next slide, which is, again, just talking a little bit about the broader approach that for any brand talent program, we certainly see this as part of a more comprehensive solution. And that's one of the questions that we're trying to answer today at Marriott is there such a thing, should there be such a thing as branded talent? Now, what do I mean by that? If we have a differentiated portfolio, if we have distinct brands within our enterprise, is it true, is it the case that each brand requires a different type of talent? And again, it's an ongoing conversation, an ongoing debate that even we're having. I think it's an interesting and even an exciting question, and I'm tending toward the answer that yes, particularly where those differences across brands are strong. It does require a different talent management platform, a different talent management program, all of course beginning even where we source that talent, and then continuing on, as you can see, from selection into new hire training, performance development, and then career development as well. The idea is that we take the promise of any particular brand, the values of that brand, and translate those values across the full spectrum of our talent management platform. Again, we're just beginning work in this area. I personally tend to advocate for the notion of branded talent. There are others who will say First and foremost, there is a hospitality personality, and if you can hire for the hospitality personality, you can then shape that unique personality into whatever brand you need that service for. Again, I don't dispute that. I think there's interesting perspectives on both sides. I simply want to share this to you because I think it's a natural extension of some of the conversation we've had already today around a service platform for one of our brands, JW Marriott, and again, seeing how that pulls into, in a broader way, our overall approach to managing change at Marriott International. I'd like to take the last few minutes of my time with you today to share some additional thoughts. If you think back to the third objective, as we think more and more about this notion of intuitive service, of doing something that comes naturally to you, of being able to serve our guests, particularly guests that are likely to be in a very different social demographic than we ourselves or than our associates are, how is it that we can actually expect reasonably to accomplish something like intuition? How can we drive service at that level? And it got me to thinking about a metaphor that many of us that were fortunate enough to attend, again, the first global conference of ACMP back in Las Vegas last spring. And I want to share that metaphor with you to remind those of you that were there and to perhaps introduce it to those who were not. So let's take a look at the next slide. It's actually one of my favorite pictures. I use this frequently, not just in training that I deliver here at Marriott, but often in consulting that I do with some of my internal clients. And again, it's simply the picture of a rider atop an elephant. And for those who are familiar, again, or for those who were able to attend the seminar last year, we were really fortunate to have Chip Heath as our keynote speaker. And again, I would commend to all of you the book, and I don't get royalties from this, but the book by Chip and Dan Heath titled Switch, How to Change Things When Change is Hard. It's within that book that Chip and Dan really pull on a metaphor, and they give credit to its source. It's not their picture at all. Rather, it's a model put together by a psychologist called Jonathan Haidt. And it's a very simple sort of three-part metaphor, three-part framework. And as you see on the next slide, we really just break this down into the rider, the elephant, and the path that both are meaning to take. Again, as Haidt will tell you, and as Chip and Dan do a fantastic job describing in their book, the first step to making things change is to make sure that your rider is informed. Make sure the rider has a very clear sense of direction, the direction they want to go. In our case, when we were talking about service training for JW Marriott, service training for any one of our brands, we want to make as clear a case as possible what we are expecting. Now, this is where it becomes a little bit tricky if we say that our expectation is intuition, which is why this whole conversation has forced me into some different ways of thinking about change management. But anyway, what we want to keep in mind, the importance of informing the rider with very clear direction. Again, research has shown that people often are not resisting change because they are somehow opposed to it. Rather, it's because they simply do not know clearly enough what you expect them to do, what is expected of them to make that change. The second piece of Haidt's model, the second piece of the framework that Chip and Dan explain in their book, really focuses on the elephant. And this represents, if the rider represents the rational side of our brains, the analytical side of how we as human beings make decisions, then the elephant represents the emotional side. It represents our impulses. It represents our preference for the status quo. And it's very deliberate. There's no mistake about it that the elephant clearly has a 6-ton advantage in this competition. So even if the rider has the clearest sense of direction, if the elephant is not appropriately, adequately motivated, then we are not going to be able to make progress. And this opens up a wonderful range of opportunities in terms of how to motivate people to do the right thing. And then lastly, again, for those that are familiar with the framework, we clear the path. And here's where we should pay attention to the environment in which we expect both rider and elephant to make changes, paying attention to the paths, the environments that we have created within our organizations to make change. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies in making a project or initiative more complicated than it really needs to be. And it's this last area of clearing the path, or more importantly, focusing on the environment, that I want to present in relationship to the conversation I've started around staff service and specifically JW service training. And this really is going to wrap up our conversation, hopefully pulling all of the pieces together. So if we take a look at the next slide, I do think we ask ourselves, and we certainly are doing it here at Marriott anyway, the extent to which we have to rethink how we manage change. Now, it was this insight for me based on this emphasis on intuition, but I think this probably applies across the board a little bit more broadly. But here what we're suggesting is that in addition to trying to train associates how to deliver service, what we also have found to be very important is to actually create an environment where they are experiencing a comparable level of service themselves. Now, this doesn't mean that we are setting our associates up in luxury hotel rooms or that we've created necessarily luxury spaces in the back of the house, but it absolutely does mean that we are paying increasingly more attention to the area of our hotels that we call the heart of house. This is the part of the hotel that's not visible to the guests. This is the part of the hotel where our employees, our associates, are spending time when they're not on the floor. This includes their locker rooms. This includes their cafeteria. This includes all of those spaces where they're spending a good portion of their work day. If we can create the right experience for them there, if we can show that we can host our associates as much and as well as we expect them to host our guests, then we believe almost by inference and certainly by intuition, certainly by experience, that our associates will be in a much better position to deliver the type of service that we want. Again, I don't know that this sounds obvious, and it's still, I think, an open question the extent to which we can prove that this does make a difference. What I do know is it harkens back to our very founders' core principle, which is to take care of our associates, and they will take care of our guests, and then our guests will return, and we have a virtuous cycle there. Again, what we're doing here at Marriott as we think of the next few years, how we want to practice the discipline of change management, we're paying more and more attention to the psychology of change. Increasingly, we are expanding our interest and our understanding of behavioral economics and to figure out those irrational factors that are shaping how people make decisions and how people change their behaviors. Again, one of the factors that we're paying attention to is the environment that we create for those that we want to change. I do think there's opportunities as well if we think even in a different level of change initiative, perhaps a systems change, that if we pay attention to the environment, if we pay attention to the way we construct the choices that we're presenting to people, whether it's on a system platform or a service platform, I think this whole idea of environment and clearing the path is important and something that personally I want to place additional emphasis on. All right, I hopefully I've been able to connect some dots for you to give you a sense of some of the challenges that we face here at Marriott as we consider the market forces that are making competition for guest loyalty increasingly competitive, particularly within the luxury tier, as well as considering the changes in demographics of our target guests and how within any demographic we know that our guests' preferences are changing as well as their definition of service. So let's just take a quick look and summation, review whether we have addressed what we set out to address in our conversation today. I'm hoping that you're leaving this call with a better appreciation and a slightly deeper understanding of what that landscape is for the luxury hotel market. Again, looking at market forces as well as guest demographics. We considered as well how different guest segments, how different generations, Gen Y, Gen X, baby boomers, may define service, what's considered important in terms of staff service, and as well explored this whole idea of intuitive service as a differentiating approach for one of the brands here at Marriott. Now, what I've tried as well through our last 5 or 10 minutes is to make the extension that when we start to focus on this question of intuition, that it does open up the door, I think, nicely for us to rethink some aspects of how we manage change, requiring us to place increasing emphasis on the environment that we want to create for that change to be successful. Again, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. We do have about 10 minutes left for open questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts on anything that I've presented today. And again, I want to offer my thanks to Lisa and the entire ACMP team for affording me this opportunity, really, and for this privilege of being the first speaker in what I'm sure is going to be an outstanding series of seminars this year. Actually, one last challenge that I would have to you. I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that if you are planning to attend, and I'm hoping you are, the next ACMP conference in Los Angeles, that is going to be hosted at the JW Marriott. Now, here's where the great opportunity is that is co-located at LA Live with our other luxury hotel, the Ritz-Carlton. So you have in the same space and literally separated only by a hotel, or rather by an elevator, you have the Ritz-Carlton and the JW Marriott. You have an iconic brand and a fast emerging luxury brand. For those that are going to go there, I would encourage you to experience both and ask yourself, what are the similarities you see in terms of the service provided? What are those differences? Again, a great opportunity to sort of bring to life what we've been talking about here and to experience it at LA Live for the ACMP conference.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and see if there's any questions. Lisa, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, James. We're now going to address some of the questions that have been posed by the audience during the presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel, and we'll take as many as time allows today. The first question came from one of our audience members, and it asked for some clarification on what guests feel are most important, business traveler versus the travel for pleasure. Could you address that, please, James?
That's a very good question. What I want to suggest, first of all, there are going to be differences, but what we are finding more and more is that we can't make that distinction. As we're doing our research, we're finding more and more that people are mixing business with leisure, business with pleasure. Again, it was a categorization, it was a segmentation that made a lot of sense, I think, 20 years ago, probably even 10 years ago. But with the increasing availability of mobile technology, with the increasing expectations of work outside of the workplace, we simply have found that our guests more and more blend both work and pleasure. So I would leave that as an answer. I do think that there would be other differences between the two, but as we, again, look forward and are rethinking the demographics of our target guests, more and more we are blending the two and seeing that there's a commonality. Now, what impact does that have on this idea of intuitive service? It makes it all the more challenging, because now we are expecting associates to be able to perceive when that guest perhaps is in pleasure mode, leisure mode, when that same guest at the same hotel for the same visit may be in business mode. And their preferences, their wants, their needs are going to be very different, even within a single stay. Next question, Lisa.
one of the questions that came up had to do with employee experience and the reward for high-level staff service. I know the hotel industry has traditionally been viewed as one that had a very high turnover rate compared to some other industries. And you talked a little bit about the hospitality personality. Can you talk a little bit about what your turnover or attrition rates are within your employee base at the JW Marriott, or perhaps even Marriott International, as well as the internal reward system that you have for those employees who have been identified as providing that superior level of service?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to. And I don't actually have the stats for this particular brand in terms of turnover, but I don't think it's out of the norm. And again, you're absolutely right, Lisa, that historically the hospitality industry experiences high levels of turnover, and Marriott's no exception in that. Typically, our rates would hover between 20 to 30%. Now, that's on average, and I'm talking about with any particular property or hotel. Now, you'll see much larger, there's a large variation depending on the department. So, for example, within housekeeping, the turnover rates are in excess of 30% typically. Perhaps for engineering, you see the turnover rates. It's a more stable workforce. It's also much smaller. But again, turnover certainly is a challenge. I do think, and more importantly, I know that one of the things that we enjoy at Marriott is extraordinarily high associate engagement, employee engagement. In fact, we've been tracking engagement now for, I think, close to 7 years. And we have, and this is not a matter of boasting, though I'm proud of it, I believe we have within the hotel industry one of, if not the highest level of associate engagement there. Now, how do we achieve that? A number of different ways, including our recognition program. We, again, create a spirit to serve culture at all of our properties, and we certainly acknowledge the service anniversaries of our associates. Again, probably typical, but the level of engagement that we have between management and our associates is something I think that's driving that engagement.
Thank you for helping clarify that, and having been a guest at more than a few of the luxury hotels within both the Ritz-Carlton and the JW Marriott brand, I have to say that it is a superior level of service. Sometimes you think that some of your associates truly do read minds.
That's good to hear.
Let's talk a little bit about the cultural dimension. You talked about going from a North American-based company to one that was more global in terms of both geography, where the hotels are located, but also that cultural dimension and how to address the variety of needs of guests. Can you talk to that just a little bit? And that'll be our last question.
No, I'd be very happy to. And it's again, this is a work in progress. We are, for all of our brands, understanding, trying to define specific service values that apply to those brands. And the question is hospitality. The challenge is hospitality is understood, it's interpreted in very different ways across cultures. Now, that's, I don't think I'm revealing anything shocking to anybody on the phone. But that said, how is it that you translate service in a very different sort of cultural context where hospitality is driven by cultural norms? More and more what we're finding is that our ability to do that well from corporate headquarters, and for those who don't know, we're based here in Bethesda, Maryland, that more and more we are unable to do that from the confines of our headquarter building, and that increasingly we need to sort of decentralize those training efforts, decentralize the ability to determine what is going to be the best way to create a service experience. What we're finding more and more is that we are moving into we call it co-creation, it's collaboration. It's going out to market with a service training product that is probably 50-60% baked, and then really working with the market, the individual markets, to bring it to the finish line based on those unique cultural differences that are going to determine how service or how hospitality is going to be brought to life on our different continents in our different countries.
Well, we certainly appreciate your taking the time today, James, to present the first in our Change Management Spotlight series. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending our first members-only webinar, Competition for Luxury, a case study in changing service behaviors for JW Marriott. I'm certain that all of you have gotten some ideas that may cause you to rethink your approach to change management in your organization as well. This members-only benefit webinar is another benefit of your membership in ACMP. And next month's webinar will be held on Tuesday, December 18th, and is entitled Change Management from Emerging Markets to Austerity. It'll be presented by Michael Nestor with the Bayer Corporation. If you'd like to experience JW Marriott's intuitive approach to customer service firsthand, ACMP would like to personally invite you to attend the 2013 Global Conference that will be held at the JW Marriott LA Live in exciting downtown Los Angeles. You can find out more about the Global Conference by visiting our website at www.acmpglobal.org. Once we finish today's webinar, you will receive a survey, and your feedback is very important to us. Your comments will help us continue to improve the services we provide you. You'll also receive a follow-up email with just a couple of business days with a link to view a recording of today's webinar, as well as access to the slide deck. On behalf of ACMP and our presenter, thank you so much for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your day. We hope to have you join us again next month. Bye now.